In the case of Bitcoin, we see a global system suddenly. And we might see some evidence of global governance happening. I'm just speculating a little here. This financial system is a global financial system without a central authority. There may be reasons that documents want to be more global rather than per jurisdiction. And maybe we'll have to imagine what those could be. If we're talking about inside of a jurisdiction, inside of a country, then yeah, the government's probably going to be hosting those types of documents. An interesting example of using blockchain technology for documents, I think, one is stocks. So one of the problems with actually startups, so if we're talking about startups, and we're talking about term sheets, and so we have let's say we have a startup and we have 15 people here, and we own different parts, he owns most of it, but he owns some of it, and he owns some of it, and I own a little of it, and you own some. And then how do we account for that thing? Like, it's probably in some Word document, he owns a lot. And then he's got a copy of the Word document, the lawyer has a copy of the Word document, maybe the government, I don't know, someone in the government has a copy. But then it changes. He sells some of his shares to him, and he sells some to her. And like all that Word document thing, like, how do we sync up that Word document? That's a beautiful case for blockchain. And NASDAQ has created Link, L-I-N-Q, to solve that. Patrick Byrne of Overstock has created T0 with the Medici lab to create that. Blythe Masters, she bought the Hyperledger software and she created digital asset holdings. She's working with Australian Stock Exchange on this particular problem. So there's certain types of documents that are very useful. The state of Delaware in the US, where there's many incorporated companies there, startups there, are looking at blockchain technologies to store these term sheets and things like that.
So maybe we can say smart contracts, that's cross borders, that multinational thing.
Ooh.
That's good?
That's a very expansive thought. The comment was thinking about using smart contracts or contracts that live on a blockchain to potentially distribute documents or take actions across borders for multinational corporations. Very interesting. We can program this stuff. We can program money, but more interesting perhaps is programming assets. Things of value or things of meaning that are on the blockchain, you can program them. So we had an earlier question about like testing this technology, and the consortiums, I think, are a good example of this. R3, I may qualify, will not talk really about doing blockchain technology. R3 is a consortium of more than 70 global financial institutions. David Rudder, I mentioned. R3 talks about distributed ledger technology, not blockchain per se. They don't talk about creating blocks of transactions. They have a notary service, a notarization server that notarizes transactions and adds them to a chain. Like that. Hyperledger, I said, is an umbrella of projects. It's open source software. There's very important members on there. American Express recently joined there. We mentioned IBM there. There's a number of financial institutions. I think 20% of the members are from China, and Japan has some members there. There's a consortium of some 30 organizations in Dubai, the Dubai Future Foundation, called the Global Blockchain Council, you might have heard of. Anybody ever heard of that one? Cool. Okay, so 10 or so people. Nice. The startup investment space is very interesting. There's been over $1.5 billion invested in maybe 1,000 or so startups. I think I have 800 here. But number of financial services organizations getting involved with various projects and such. And lots of new VC firms, venture capital firms have gotten into investing specifically into blockchain, distributed ledger technologies. A lot of them were early in investing in Bitcoin startups, but in September of 2015, that just stopped, like a rock just dropped, and people stopped pretty much investing in them. Unocoin had an investment recently from India, the exchange, and they're doing some interesting things with banks over there. Unocoin. They went through the Boost VC incubator. I mentioned Boost VC to one of you all. But look at this. I mean, since the last 5 or so years, or from 2014, all of these financial institutions have been getting into this space. They've been investing in startups, they've been doing proof of concepts, they've been writing white papers, all of these guys have blockchain labs, people studying the technology. They're the first into the game because this was like all about money. Now we see the insurance companies getting in. Now we see the telecoms getting in. Orange Telecom they have a lab based in San Francisco. They call it Orange Silicon Valley. And they had some blockchain study group going on there. A number of other ones. This is a document that was created, an infographic created by a William Mogayar. He wrote a book called Business of Blockchain. It's a good primer. It's a high-level primer on blockchain technologies. He's written a lot about startups and startup management. He's a VC. He's based in the New York area. He's a keynote speaker. And he created this really to demonstrate sort of the areas of blockchain relative to the financial services organization. At the very bottom, you see the base protocols. You see things like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Ripple over here on the left, and the miners, the maintainers of this network. So you need computers to maintain these blockchain networks. And then above that, you start to see companies that provide application programming interfaces, APIs, into the blockchains, ways of accessing the data that's stored in the blockchain. And then above that, you see lots of types of companies that are creating solutions, things around compliance and things around trading platforms. There's even blockchain ATMs, teller machines. A bunch of banks have gotten involved. Interesting things going on trade finance. Someone mentioned IBM, I think, in this lecture here. IBM is doing a lot with trade finance and blockchain. Very huge effort getting into the open letter, the letter of credit, open account, such. This is a little bit old. This is about 2015, but there's still some important lessons here. It talks about 2/3 of the investment has gone into like 11 companies. It's a little bit more now. Digital Asset Holdings raised about $50 or $60 million. That's not on here. Blockstream raised $74 million. That's not on there. But interestingly, 21, which is the one on the left side, formed by Balaji Srinivasan, who's a partner at Andreessen Horowitz, venture capitalist firm. Mark Andreessen, the Firefox browser, that guy. So they have Andreessen Horowitz. Balaji Srinivasan created something called 21. It was initially based upon mining, creating micro mining chips. He had deals with Qualcomm and Cisco, and they were going to embed chips into things like even set-top boxes and telephones. But he kind of pivoted. He moved on. He laid off the hardware team. They had a Bitcoin computer. It was you could buy it for $400. He's moved on to more of a software model, and he has a lot of money to continue to exist. He's in the Bay Area. Coinbase is in the Bay Area. Circle is in the US. Chain is in the Bay Area. Ripple is in the Bay Area. BitPay is in Atlanta. Zappo started in Palo Alto, then they went to like Switzerland, then they went to Hong Kong, then they went back to Switzerland. Zappo's so interesting. Zappo, it does remittance. They send money cross borders. And Zappo was bought by PayPal in 2015, November of 2015. But Zappo, and this is not the shoe company, it's with an X, guys. So Zappo has on their board Dee Hock, who created Visa, Larry Summers, the Treasury Secretary in the Clinton administration, and John Reed, who's the ex-CEO and chairman of the board of Citigroup. Like Zappo, like this startup. Like that shows you the people who've gotten involved in this ecosystem. So just to touch a bit about regulation, Bitcoin itself has been regulated in various ways. Someone was asking me on break two about is Bitcoin a currency? Is it an asset? It just depends on what part of the government, the US government. IRS Texas talks about Bitcoin being an asset, where you have an investment, an asset, where you have a short-term or long-term gain when you buy or sell the thing. You have to report it like that. So certain countries, Bitcoin is legal. Japan, we'll talk about that in a second. Some countries are very hostile to Bitcoin. This used to be a lot more red. This is really evolving. Like Russia used to be very hostile. And then someone said, hey, Mr. Putin, why don't we create a Putin coin? So it went from red to yellow. And they're talking about in 2018 kind of legalizing parts of this technology in Russia. So you can go to bitlegal.io and follow up on that. Just wanted to touch a bit on the regulatory landscape. But quick question? Yeah.
Do you think that is part of the trade of money laundering?
Money laundering, yeah. Certainly, there's money laundering issues there. A lot about it. But also, like in the case of China, when money was leaving China, how are they going to track it? How are they going to get it back? They can't. That would be an issue around China. Just upsetting the current financial system in the countries, I think, is another issue. Like, why do we want this currency? It's illegal to own it. Some countries have said that it's illegal to own Bitcoin. You know, it's a penalty. So in Japan, they just talked about the Financial Services Agency, just talked April 1st, I think the law went in effect. Bitcoin and other virtual currencies are legitimate currencies. This is profound. What does it mean? They can tax stuff. Any transaction that happens over cryptocurrency, they can tax it, right? They can have a greater oversight over their virtual economy. They can see what's going on. And it turns out there's even some big retailers who are doing some Bitcoin trials. And they're also insisting that exchanges, now an exchange is where you can buy or sell Bitcoin, and those exchanges need to be regulated. So if a Japanese person wants to buy or sell Bitcoin, they need to go to an exchange. I go to an exchange called Coinbase, so I had to give my driver's license and tell them who I was and my telephone. They would send me messages and all that. Just KYC, just like at a bank. Wish we had more time for this. This is super interesting, like the various types of non-financial use cases here. One that you can play with, I just love this one, and particularly about your records. And our colleague here, yes, Mr. Abdullah? Yeah. So he's talking about issuing birth certificates on blockchains. Birth certificate. Well, it turns out with Stamp.io, you've seen Stamp.io? Oh, of course. So I can take a document and I can just drag it onto this interface. So like this presentation or something, I can drag it on there. Or if I scanned my birth certificate, I could drag it on here. Or digital art. Let's say I create some digital art, beautiful piece. I can drag, or a piece of music. I have a song, I compose a song. I record it. I take that audio file and I drag it onto here. What happens? The thing, and I've got a couple of example files there. I put them on. This one is in, I think, April 22nd, 2017. I get a certificate from Stampery, for free, actually. They just opened up free service. It says, this thing was written not only to the Bitcoin blockchain, but to the Ethereum blockchain. This is mind-boggling, I know, for some of you. Some of you, you've never heard of blockchain. This is kind of advanced in that sense. But it's a non-financial use case of blockchain technology where we're dragging a document, it's getting hashed. So there's a function, a computer function that reduces that big file. It might be a 20 megabyte audio file of my song. It gets reduced to a tiny little string of digits, hexadecimal digits. And that string of digits gets written to the blockchain, into a block, into a transaction. But that string of digits is unique to my 20 megabyte song. If I go back in and change that song, I add a singer, the file that gets saved there, when I use that function, that computer function, to hash it to the string, it'll give me a different string. So if you copy my song and do something to it, I can prove that my song I put on the blockchain first. I put it on the blockchain first. Well, maybe it's his song and I put it on there. That's a different story. But I can prove that I put that document, Robert PDF, on the blockchain in April 22nd of this year, or last year, whenever it was. I can prove that. That's cool. That's like really cool. That could stand up in court. That my proof of putting the document on the blockchain. Quick question.
You stamp that file.
What gets written to the blockchain is just a hash. It's a small hash, so that never changes. The size that gets written into the operator. Let's take one other question and we'll move on. Yeah. I can go back to the document using the hash. Well, it's probably in that hash. Well, in that opcode, we might want to put a URI or a URL that points to a document in the cloud. I might do some other stuff like that, or create a system around that. But it's not like a complete solution. It's a fragment of a solution. Yeah.
The document itself is not unique, so I can take it and upload it at the same time.
You could, if you had the exact same file, you could also write it to the blockchain, and then we'd still be in court going, well, I wrote it first, I wrote it second, it's mine, it's yours, you know. Yeah. Blockchain for healthcare, there's been a lot of exploration of this, kind of a cute diagram. Hashed Health is a blockchain consortium that started in Tennessee. And there's a number of healthcare organizations that are working on, should we put medical record data or some instance of that data on a blockchain? If I have a medical record, can I open it up? So let me just sidetrack a little bit and say, one of the interesting use cases around blockchain is I can figure out ways to escrow money. So I want to buy, your camel. So I'll put, $10,000 into escrow. You give me the camel, and then the money moves out of escrow to you. What if I could escrow my medical data? What does that mean? Like, if I have a record, I say, well, you're my doctor. No, I come to the country here, and you're the doctor in this country. Oh, I need something, I want to show you my data. I want to show you my record. But you only have access for 2 days. And after that, it closes off. Yes, he could copy it. He could do all sorts of other, it wouldn't be convenient, perhaps. But there's a way, perhaps, to escrow or share data on a limited time basis and bring it back. That's an interesting use case. Lots of exploration in this area. It's the fact that, I might have 10 different x-rays at, 3 different places. Like, when did I have them and where are they and who has them? If we can, in a sense, start to centralize, like, the existence of those x-rays, and we can timestamp them and prove those series of x-rays, that could be very interesting. So lots of exploration here. There's a guy named Antonis Palemitis. He's running the University of Nicosia near Greece. It's in Cyprus. And they have a free blockchain, a free cryptocurrency course. Has anybody taken that course? Yeah, of course. Great. There's a free cryptocurrency course by the University of Nicosia, Nicosia, Nicosia. And he's also a VC. He's running this university. I think his father started it. They train more accountants than anybody in the world, by the way. They have the first master's in cryptocurrency, a master's degree in cryptocurrency, very interesting. So he was on Twitter, and he created this list of very interesting blockchain examples. And the first ones are financial, so I left them off this list. And there's some public records, semi-public, and private types of records you can see there. You can just simply go to this list, the Mega Master Blockchain list. It was created in 2014. It's a little old, but it's still valuable. There's some still interesting ideas there. Okay, we're going to change gears here. We're aiming to get an app and then give you some Bitcoin. And then we'll kind of have to understand, like, what is this transaction? So you're going to download this app. It's a little complicated, and if you get frustrated, we'll see if we can get past many agreements you have to make on this app and all this. You don't need to back up your wallet and all this stuff. But you're going to have this app, and you're going to click a receive, and someone's going to scan your QR code and then make a transaction of Bitcoin, test Bitcoin, into your Bitcoin wallet on your phone. That's what we're going to do. So a Bitcoin transaction is a moving of Bitcoin from a set of public and private keys that I hold in my wallet to your wallet. So it's moving from a public and private key that I own to a public and private key that you own. And so, how does it move? So probably a little beyond the scope of this talk, but in brief, I think there's some advanced people in here. It might be interesting. Like, if I bought from Coinbase 50 Bitcoins in one transaction, and I just want to send you a half a Bitcoin, it's interesting. It's like having a $50 bill, because I would give it to him, and he would give me $49.50 change. That's how it would work in paper money. In Bitcoin, it's similar. If I bought 50 Bitcoins and I want to give you a half Bitcoin, the system the wallet software itself and the transactions as they would work on the internet, would send him a half Bitcoin, and then it would send me back 49 and a half Bitcoins into a new wallet address. That's an advanced topic. That won't be on the test, but just to think about that. So value moves across the network. It might be financial value. It might be healthcare records. It might be marriage certificates. And then we wrap up these into a transaction. It gets put into a mining pool. The miners see all these transactions, and they put them all together and stick them in a block. And the transactions in the Bitcoin system are in plain text, but not so in the Zcash system or the Monero system. And in the Bitcoin world, we broadcast all these transactions to all the blocks. So all the miners, all the participants, all the machines in the network know more or less about all the transactions. And then they put them into the blockchain. So let's move on to cryptocurrency wallets. And these are going to be, this is the app. We're going to download a cryptocurrency wallet. And there's a number of types. And this is a little bit more advanced information. Turns out there's like hardware devices that you can store value on. You can put stuff on paper, or you can put stuff in an app on your phone. And so even a browser, a brain wallet, you can memorize the password and store. Very interesting kind of thing. Hardware and paper we mentioned. This won't be on the test, but multi-sig, yes. Multi-sig, you can have multiple signatures. It takes, let's say we want to do a deal together. So we put together $100,000. We each put in 20,000 bucks. And we want to buy something from those guys. But in order to do it, we're going to need 3 of our signatures. 3 people have to sign off. In the world of paper, man, that's going to take like months to do. But all we have to do here is create a multi-signature wallet, assign us each as signatories, and specify that we need 3 signatures to spend anything out of this wallet. Boom, we're done. Now we can buy from them when we want, when we have 3 signatures. Like if all of us die, well, we lose that money. That's kind of a problem. But physical wallets. There's so many coming out now. It's very interesting technology, and it's very important for the phone companies to know that what happens when the wallet is going to be on the phone in a physical way. This is already starting to happen. Paper wallets. I have some examples here. All of these pieces of paper have Bitcoin on them. It's actually testnet Bitcoin. But like I've just got piles of them. Like there's Bitcoin here, there's Bitcoin here. All of these it's like paper money. Bitcoin is there. If anybody wants to download the Mycelium wallet, there's a way you can scan. You can try that out later if you've already done some of the other exercises. Such interesting technology here for hardware wallets and being able to enter in pins and stuff. You've seen this probably in other types of applications, but it's really happening. We're going to use this today. We're going to download the BitPay's CoPay wallet. BitPay is a startup, raised about $34 million. They were based in Atlanta. They've had some struggles. Some people came in and stole 5,000 Bitcoins from them. Not only once, twice, within like a 24-hour period. It was just, they developed very secure technology, but they didn't use it. It was kind of unfortunate. It was one of the companies that was really very, very interesting and really helped the ecosystem quite a lot, but just had some mistakes. Which meant, someone mentioned this today too. There's something called ransomware. Many of you have heard of it, where, like for instance, there was a hospital in LA. They took over the hospital, some hackers took over the hospital and say, we want, I don't know what, $5,000 in Bitcoin to be sent to this address, and then we'll unlock all your computers. One of the reasons to buy Bitcoin is a terrible reason. But what if someone hacks your network and says, we want Bitcoin and we'll release your network? Well, how many days is it going to take you to go set up a Bitcoin account and buy some Bitcoin? It's going to take you a week. If you had $10,000 sitting around in Bitcoin, well, then you could pay off the ransomware. It's a terrible thing to think about, but it's a very big reality. There's lots of cases of ransomware and stuff. So, yeah, this is the other wallet. There's a testnet version of this wallet on the Android phone, not on the iPhone. On the iPhone, you can't use this for testnet Bitcoins. So there's a production network of Bitcoin where we have real money, and there's a test network where we have play money. We can play with it. We're going to do that. Bread wallets, and there's some bunch of other wallets here, everybody. Jack's wallet is a very powerful wallet. It's a very, very interesting and useful wallet. This one takes a lot of different types of coins. Zcash and Monero, I think, and Ethereum and Bitcoin and Ethereum Classic, and some other hardware wallets, lots of interesting features here. The Keep Key wallet, the Case wallet's been around for a while. Ledger out of France, doing some very interesting things with this particular wallet. Lots of programming tools with this one particular Mycelium Entropy. There's even now back to apps at the App Store and such. There's the Bitcoin testnet. It's pretty simple. It's Android only. It's pretty limited in functionality, but it's open source code, so you can play around with it. You can copy it. So this is something you could take and create perhaps a wallet for one of your phone implementations. This would be a good one perhaps to start with. So we talked a little bit about Bitcoin exchanges. BTC Oasis is the one in Dubai. This is the one that probably serves most people in the area. I use Coinbase, whatever, it's in the US. It's the second largest global exchange. It has $750 million deposits, or at least that's what they say. Interesting, where do they store that $750 million of deposits? Is it like on the internet? Is it like live? No. It's in something called cold storage. It's like printed on paper. Yeah, paper, like this. So they take it off of the internet in a sense, and they put it on here. So it's not, the keys are not digitally held on a device. Any of those hardware devices we just saw, or on my phone, or on a computer, or on a server, the keys are not stored there. They're in a sense burned onto a piece of paper, and this piece of paper is put into a vault and secured. Think about it. $750 million, they say it's over 90% of that is stored on paper. They just say hardware solutions. They don't really say paper per se. It's a combination of probably paper and some of those hardware wallet solutions, some other things. But it's not stored on machines that are attached to any internet. You can go to an ATM. I don't know where all these ATMs are in the US, but you can imagine where they might be. But it's interesting, like 500 startups had an ATM for a while. That's the big incubator in Silicon Valley. And Deloitte, I think in Canada or something, Deloitte Consulting got an ATM for Bitcoin. Sometimes they'll bring them into hackathons and whatnot. There's hundreds of Bitcoin ATMs in the world now, and I think there's dozens of companies that produce these ATMs. So you can stick in paper money and then you get emailed your Bitcoin. Or in some cases, you can email them or scan a QR code and give them some Bitcoin, and out will come paper money. Local Bitcoins. Anybody use local Bitcoins? Yes. So you can go into a dark alley and ask somebody, hey, can I buy some Bitcoin from you? I got some Bitcoin here for you, like he or she, might just say, look, give me some cash and I'll scan your QR code and I'll transfer you Bitcoin right here. We won't go through a bank. We won't go through Coinbase. We won't go through BTC Oasis. So if you go to localbitcoins.com or something, you'll see a list of people selling Bitcoin on the internet, but also off the internet. So you meet them in a coffee shop, Starbucks down the road. I'm going to buy some Bitcoin from you. What's the problem with that? Back to exchanges, a lot of exchanges have been hacked. Mt. Gox was hacked for 420 some odd million of Bitcoin back in 2014 or so. Most recently, Bitfinex was hacked last year for $75 million. So hackers stole that Bitcoin. So then they go around buying things and selling it to people and all. That coin actually is considered stolen coin, because it is. It is stolen coin. And so if you go to Coinbase and say, hey, I want to open up a Bitcoin account, I've got, $100,000 worth of Bitcoin, and they say, well, let me see it. And they'll look at those addresses and go, that's stolen Bitcoin. So we actually have a fungibility problem in Bitcoin. Not all coins are equal. And it turns out when exchanges buy Bitcoin from a miner who gets them every 10 minutes, different miners get it, they sell it to the exchanges at a premium, 20 to 30% above the normal price of Bitcoin. Why? Because it's clean coin. It's not been stolen. It's not been used on the Silk Road. BitOasis not only has an exchange, but they have a wallet, like we're going to play with a wallet. Coinbase is there also. This is a pretty complex diagram, and it really would take us another hour to go through thoroughly. And we have a question which I'll take when I pass over this slide. Block Geeks talks about, what is blockchain technology? This is a pretty good explanation. I recommend taking a look at that. This shows you how Bitcoin moves from one person to another through the network and all. But yeah, I'll take your question. And if you could get a mic, that'd be great.
Thank you.
And just hold that one thought. This is BlockCypher, their testnet explorer, and then we're going to get into the lab. And then we're going to download a wallet, configure it, load it, and share Bitcoin with a partner. And then the two apps, if you're on an iPhone, you want to get copay for the iPhone. And if you're on Android, you want to get copay for the Android. And I understand that more of you have iPhones, so you can probably just scan that QR code or go to that URL, or just go to the App Store and just type in copay, as it's spelled there, and you'll see copay Bitcoin wallet. And please download that wallet, and now I'll take your question.
Okay, thank you. My question is about hacking in Bitcoin. So at the very beginning of this talk, you said that Bitcoin's been around for a long time and it's never been hacked. But then we've had a lot of examples of not Bitcoin, but like services associated with Bitcoin getting hacked for serious money. And I don't understand the distinction between the two.
Beautiful question. So the question around Bitcoin as a software, as such, hasn't been, I said, significantly hacked. There was an early bug where there was some double spending going on, but not much of it happened. The developers noticed it. They fixed the problem. This is a beautiful way that global community worked. They got on IRC channels and they talked to each other and said, hey, there's a bug in the software, let's fix it right now, and then roll it out to the miners, which they did. So, let's say I'm an exchange, and I print out a bunch of the Bitcoin. So you deposit 10 Bitcoins with me, and I'm holding your Bitcoin. So turns out, I can hold your Bitcoin as an exchange like Coinbase does, and like I think BitOasis does. But today, we're going to give you testnet Bitcoin that's going to live on your phone. It's not going to live on an exchange. It's going to live right on your phone. If we're going to play local Bitcoins and I'm going to sell you Bitcoin at Starbucks, that Bitcoin is probably going to go right onto your phone, stored on your phone, just like you have money in your wallet. If you lose your phone, you lose your Bitcoin. So that's a very important distinction. Is the STC coin stored on the mobile phone, or is it stored in the cloud? Or kind of both? Well, maybe some of it's stored in the cloud, maybe some of it's stored on the phone. Who knows? That's an interesting experiment, perhaps. So, if I'm an exchange and people have been depositing Bitcoin in my exchange and I'm printing it out into cold storage, and I just happen to drop some and someone comes, someone hacks into my office and, goes running out the door with these. This is not Bitcoin's problem. If I have a $5 bill, and I leave it there and I forget it's there and I leave today, and somebody comes and takes the $5 bill, that's not the Federal Reserve's problem with the currency. That's just, so what's happened in those exchanges typically is someone gets access to administrator passwords, then they get access to backup of keys, of private and public keys, particularly the private keys that unlock the Bitcoin and such. And then they use those to send that money to a different key pair. That's typically what happens. So, has anybody who's trying to do this not been successful for finding copay? Everybody's got copay if you're involved here? Okay. For some of you advanced people who have done some of this, there's the Mycelium testnet wallet. And if you wanted to, I can show you how to scan some Bitcoin. It's kind of weird. You have to hit the 3 dots and go into cold storage and then scan, and then you can scan some of these Bitcoins if you wanted. So if you want to do, and this is only for Android users, sorry, but if you wanted to do, you could scan on the send. It says you'll scan the one on send. There's tiny bits of testnet Bitcoin there. So now, the configuration is crazy. There's a lot of terms you have to accept and agree with this, agree with that. I don't think there's anything dangerous about this wallet. We're not using it for real Bitcoin, but we're going to have to set up a test wallet. The first thing it does when you get in there is it sets up a real wallet where you could put in real Bitcoin. And so it's a little confusing to deal with once you get it. So I do have some helpers in the room that are going to help you add some Bitcoin to your account. You first just have to set it up, and it's a little bit complicated, as I said. But once you've set it up, once you've gotten through all of the agreements and the skip this, just skip everything, don't back up the wallet, take the agreements, and when you're done with that, and I'll go through this a couple times. I'm going to go through these slides like twice, and then we can review as necessary. You're going to create a new personal wallet, which is a testnet wallet. And don't click the green button so quickly because you want to turn on, you first want to name it. You can name it whatever you want. I called mine testnet. So you name it testnet. Don't click that green button. Click show advanced options. So when you click show advanced options, everybody there who's going? Tell me if I need to stop. I get to this screen, but then I need to swipe up to get to this screen and to turn on testnet. So you're creating a wallet. So in your phone, in this app that you just downloaded, Copay, you're going to have two wallets, not one. You can have many. And with Copay, you can create that multi-sig wallet we were talking about too, which is really cool. So we're going to create a testnet wallet. Click the Create New Wallet button. And when you're done with that, you have a testnet wallet called testnet or whatever you called it. And it's sitting there. Doesn't have any BTC. Anybody, so any of you helpers, guys, can you just stand up? We're going to get you ready anyway. Do you need anybody need some help here? A little bit of help? Could you please check in with your neighbors and friends and colleagues and other people and raise your hand if you need some help. And then if you're ready to receive some Bitcoin, what you're going to do is like this. You're going to click this receive icon here. It's a kind of a weird one. Okay, and what he's going to do, our helpers here, they've got like some Bitcoin. They're going to give you like $5 of US $5. They're going to scan your, this is going to create a QR code in your wallet. But you need to swipe over to get to testnet here because it might not say testnet. So you swipe over and it'll change the QR code. If you try to put production, it won't receive the Bitcoin. That would be an error. So then our helpers here are going to scan your QR code, and then they're going to specify an amount and send you some Bitcoin. So I will also get involved, but again, to configure that thing, you create a new personal wallet, you gave it a name, you went to advanced options, you swiped up, you got the testnet, that's very important. You can't change it later. You create the new wallet, there it is, and then you're ready to receive Bitcoin. And once you've done that, you'll swipe over to get the new your QR code, and then you'll click, yeah, you've got it, and someone will scan and give you some Bitcoin. And I've got some here too. So this will be the last big exercise. Then we'll have like a 2-hour test, and then you can go home. No, I'm kidding. We'll kind of wrap up sort of after this exercise. I'll stay around for question and answer, but let me come down and maybe help here. I'm going to turn off the mic. Okay. All you money transfer people. It's fun, I know. And I'm sorry some of you haven't received your test Bitcoin. I'm going to hang out until you have it. So your homework, you've got lots of homework. Go buy some real Bitcoin. Give it away. Give it away to your kids, your friend. Give it for a birthday present. Here's $50. Ooh, how are they going to figure out how to use it? You know? Expedia takes Bitcoin. Overstock takes Bitcoin. Some of the Microsoft PlayStation, I think, was taking Bitcoin for a while. They still take it? I don't know. Just careful where they spend it, maybe. So, don't give them too much.
I have a question.
There's a question. Go ahead.
Hey, Here, on your left. How does bitcoins are valued at a certain point in time?
It's the market, whatever somebody wants to pay for it. Today, are you willing to pay $1,200 for a Bitcoin? Maybe, maybe not. But if tomorrow it goes to 14, then you go, oh, it's going up, you'll buy it. Or you won't. You'll wait till it goes to 800. It might never go to 800 again. We don't know. Bitcoin's a lot used now for speculation. People made lots of money buying Bitcoin.
When I go to Expedia, for example,
yes,
how would they value?
At today's market price. Same with Dell Computer. Dell Computer was taking it for a while too. I think they still do. So interesting. Thanks for the question. Okay, we've focused a lot on Bitcoin because Bitcoin is the software that has demonstrated the value of blockchain today, in that it's worth 20 billion market cap, open source code, and a massive global network. Not only are there financial use cases, there are many non-financial use cases. And blockchains are groups of blocks of transactions we talked about, but distributed ledgers are a superset where blockchain sits underneath. So I think you'll be seeing and hearing more about distributed ledgers and a little less and less about blockchain. The same way where Bitcoin used to dominate the mediascape and the thought space, it's gone down, blockchain rose, and I think we'll start to see distributed ledgers rise and blockchains coming down a little bit. I could be wrong, but that's my prediction. Lots of information was covered. As I said at the beginning of the lecture, if you never even heard of a blockchain, maybe 10% is there. You understand some of the things. It's just such a broad topic, and it takes a lot of explanation. To really understand it in depth, you have to either be a coder or watch a coder work to build something. That's my theory, that you learn by building something that demonstrates the concepts of decentralizations, of append-only blockchain kind of transactions, of the assets, of the cryptographic characteristics of the technology and such. So thank you all for your patience. Thank you all for playing the Bitcoin game. If you all want to stand and sing the Saudi Telecom song to me, I'll listen. Just joking. I really enjoyed working with you all, and I hope we continue to work together. And thank you, Lamarca, for bringing me here. And I will be here for a little while longer to pass out some more testnet coins and take questions. So thank you all again. See you another time.
الله يعطيكم العافية يا شباب على الحضور وما قصرتوا، وأي واحد عنده سؤال يقدر يسأل الرجال. في أحد عنده سؤال؟
I have a small question. What about the availability? I mean, if now I'm going to start a company with my friends here, usually startups go to cloud like Google Cloud, Microsoft, Amazon. So what is it required to start up a kind of a startup business using blockchain? Should we write the code ourselves? Should we take the open source and start to edit it? Or there is some kind of software as a service or platform as a service for this?
How to start up a startup using distributed ledger and blockchain technology. I threw the distributed ledger in there. It's hard. Smart money, that is investors, some of the top venture capitalists are putting less money. In 2016, they invested in about 5 startups. In 2015, they did 8 startups. There's less money going around for startups there. Boost VC used to invest in big classes of startups in their incubator. They're doing less. They're doing more in virtual reality and artificial reality. It's a tough ecosystem to get money, but I think if you partner with corporates, that's one strategy to consider. And in that light, you'd have to find softwares that are compatible with them. I mean, I might just give you some more free advice. Like, I would also be looking into artificial intelligence, because when we talked about smart contracts and things of that nature, you're going to see artificial intelligence both being like rules-based types of smart contract engines, as well as oracles that feed data feeds into smart contracts and those sorts of things. So I think you're going to see a stronger marriage of artificial intelligence, particularly machine learning, but maybe other aspects, depending on your type of startup. I'm not a VC myself, so I would highly recommend you talk to VCs, people who invest, and remember, you'll have to be beholden to them and their investment. They probably want a 4x investment or more. So, yeah. The open source is a good space. The problem with doing like Bitcoin, there's a lot of bad sort of bad sort of reputation around Bitcoin technologies. Rootstock may prove that wrong. Very brilliant guys out of Argentina I mentioned, sort of in that space. Ethereum is a very risky bet, I think, because just trying to scale that network and do network sharding and things of that nature is just very complex what they're trying to do. I think those guys will have success whatever they do eventually, the founders. And then lastly, taking something like Hyperledger, one of the projects there, and working on them is a safe bet. Microsoft has Blatchery and that cloud system there. I don't feel as confident about Microsoft's investment in this space as I do, say, IBM.
What about if it's going to be blockchain-based, not cryptocurrency-based?
So the question around cryptocurrency versus blockchain-based, I think you're in a safer space than trying to deal with currencies. But very interesting things are going on with currencies all the same. There was even a VC firm called BlockChain Capital that just raised $10 million in 6 hours, and they issued a coin which represent investment in their fund. So let's say I have a $100 million fund, and I take $10 million and I say I'm going to create blockchain capital coin, BCC. You can buy BCC from me, and I'm selling them in $10,000 units, and you can buy as many as you want, and I'm going to sell $10 million of them. Very interesting. Just happened last week it was announced. It wasn't obvious when they did that sale, though. Interesting. So, yeah, yes? It was what they call an ICL, thank you, which is an initial coin offering. There's lots of predictions that these technologies will disrupt venture capital and the way companies can create their own stock by issuing tokens that have a value based upon what the company is estimated to be worth. Yeah.
So you mentioned, that's pretty well known.
Here's the mic. Let's use that. Thanks very kindly. And then you can pass it to the next person, maybe.
Yeah, it's pretty, so what happened now, the money is getting less and less in the blockchain space, especially for venture capital, more from the corporate. And it's, we heard that as well. I'm just wondering from your perspective why that is and what happened with the investment that happened in 2015. Were there any commercial viability there? Because this has been around for more than 8 years. What are the success stories to kind of return that prosperity back?
The question around, there's less interest in this technology than there was a couple years ago. I mean, the research group Gartner talks about the hype cycles of technologies, and I think we've experienced that very recently. In the case of the Bitcoin and the blockchain space, we saw the Bitcoin and investment stopped in September 2015. Blockchain, and then it just has been waning and waning. The technology is very early. There's not a proven identity system that's used on the network, on the internet, period, much less with blockchain. So until we get at least government, if not global identity systems that can be trusted and relied upon, blockchain really requires that. Like, even if I'm issuing a stock, like to who and to what? Like Fabric and IBM is using certificate authorities. They're just using the same old thing that's been used, I don't know, 20, 15 years of such, right? Like, they just plug that in. There's an interesting identity organization called Sovereign, S-O-V-R-I-N. They're going to join, they have joined the Hyperledger project, so that'll be a project there for identity. In the short, I think my answer is, the technology's too early. And the early investments were, those VCs had money to invest and they're ready to go. But it's so complex, this technology, that startups are having a much harder time entering the space and getting funding. But if you can bootstrap, I think you're in a good place. And I don't know, I'm a little more conservative in terms of what I would do as a startup. I've not run a startup myself. I've done ventures on my own, but not startup, high growth, high-tech, high growth. So I would consider partnering with corporations or consortiums You know, it's a little safer bet. Again, then you're beholden to them and their trajectory. And if they don't continue to invest, then it looks bad to you. So there's an upside and a downside of that too.
Have you been exposed to any commercially viable project incoming in the next 12 months, up to 18 months, that you feel is happening?
A what?
Commercially viable.
Commercially viable project that'll be coming the 12th. I know my phone is making some noises here. I'm supposed to wake up in case I fell asleep. The commercially viable, there are some very interesting ones out there. We could take that offline a little bit. Yeah, there's some pretty hot startups. Really smart people working on this stuff. Yeah. And I've gotten a lot of them to teach in our courses. It's just been extraordinary, because I've learned so much. You learn from these brilliant startup founders, these massive, huge-minded. Vitalik Buterin taught in our course. It's just mind-blowing. And Vlad Zamper, his colleague from the Ethereum Foundation. And there's another very interesting project, IPFS, Interplanetary File System, Juan Benet, brilliant guy, very humble guy. Check that out. He's like, if the internet was designed today, how would you design it? Could it work across planets? His solution can. He cryptographically secures every URL. It prevents man-in-the-middle attacks and things like that. IPFS.io. One question in the back, and then we'll come to you. Yeah.
Yes, hello. What do you think the future will be? Of currency, the world, digital, everything. What do you think the future will be look like?
Oh, tulips? I'm sorry.
Okay. How?
Yeah. Well,
your expectation about the future with all of this coming together?
Very nice question. About the future, I think cryptocurrencies are here to stay. I think governments will experiment with and issue cryptocurrencies in the next 2 to 3 years. I'll tell you a side note that NASA in the US has been predicting a 10 to 12% chance of a solar flare hitting the Earth, which will knock out the internet and everything else. I think people should have a kind of a part of their strategy thinking about that, if that were to happen. But that's NASA, right? Like that's the Mayan calendar, those Indians, that in 2020 the world would recycle itself. So it's curious that that's kind of coming together. So that was my personal opinion about future. But crypto economics is a very fascinating field. And to really be a qualified person in this era, I think you need deep understanding of technology. If you're a technologist, you need deep understanding of law, of business, of economics to really build solutions in this area. I mean, to your point, like your team needs to have diversity in these other areas. Probably law, especially it's non-financial. You might be in some areas of regulation and that sort of thing. And having people in the area of economics, because if you're issuing tokens or something, there's a whole understanding there about the value and such. ICOs certainly depend on that sort of future projection. But cryptocurrencies are here to say programmable money, programmable assets, and combining that with AI, I think we're going to see massive innovation in the next year. We're in a renaissance, in my opinion. We're in a renaissance of activity. We'll have this one and then this one. And you have the mic? Who's got the mic? Oh, take it. Let's take him and then go here. Take this class for. Yeah. And then pass to him, please. Yeah. I hope that satisfied your answer. We can take that offline. But yeah, cryptocurrencies are here to stay, and crypto economics is like a brand new field. It's like.
I need to know in brief what is Ethereum and why people buy Ether. I can understand why they buy Bitcoins, but why Ethereum?
Right. Yeah. Interesting question, why people buy Ethereum, what's interesting about it. So there's a guy who was, at age 17, he was the editor of Bitcoin magazine, which he later sold, he left out of it, named Vitalik Buterin. He dropped out of the University of Waterloo in Canada, and for me, he's a savant. He knows so much. He's brilliant. He has some awkward social skills. And he just came up with this whole system. Having looked at Bitcoin for a number of years, he got a Peter Thiel fellowship. So he got $100,000 from Peter Thiel to drop out of college to work on the Ethereum project. He did it with Dr. Gavin Wood, who's running a consultancy in Europe right now. Left the Ethereum Foundation. But they created a system that's sort of Bitcoin 2.0, where they have more programmability in it. In the Bitcoin programming world, you have a Turing incomplete programming language, which means your programs can't keep running and running and running and running and running. Like your software here is always running to say, is a phone call coming? It's Turing complete. Is somebody pressing something? Is he downloading an app? Is he transferring value? What is he doing? It's always thinking. But in Bitcoin, I send a transaction and the network stops. It waits for another transaction to go into the pool. The miners pick up the transactions, create a block, and then it stops for 10 minutes, in a sense. There's still other activities. But the transactions that move value from one user to another user, the code executes that in a stack-based language and then stops. It does everything it says to do on the stack and then stops. That's a Turing incomplete language. Ethereum was built with a Turing complete language, which is very risky because you can't predict all the attack vectors because the thing is constantly running. New things are happening. The code is getting upgraded. So it was a promise of a new system. Many corporations have been interested in the Ethereum system. And there was something called the DAO hack. It was $50 million. It was crazy. They hacked a smart contract, and it was an investment fund like a YouTube, and that was kind of crazy. But still, people believe in Ethereum a lot. It's gone up, what, 30% in the last some 30 days. People are buying and selling it. So a lot of this is people gambling, honestly, right? Maybe it's kind of programming gambling or something, but it's people are betting on it, and people are wanting to make money on it. There's some people who have got big net worths in these cryptocurrencies, so they also want the ecosystem to float everybody else, because then it helps them too. Thanks for your question. Yes?
Actually, okay. So from your exposure and experience, what's the appetite of these large corporations such as IBM and Cisco and what have you to partner with startups? Because from the example you provided, it seems like they're actually getting into this space themselves.
Yeah. It's hard for startups. There's been a lot of experiments with startups. I saw Price Waterhouse just interview dozens and dozens of startups. R3 is probably, with Tim Swanson, he's interviewed over 250 startups. I think collectively the company's interviewed over 400 startups. I mean, and that's like taking a serious phone call or two or three, or meeting them in person as well. There's a lot of appetite to partner with good startups. There typically is with corporations, just as a general statement. But IBM, I'd just be a little careful because they have so much manpower, people power, that, how much do they really need the startup ecosystem? So a lot of these sorts of things are for, getting ideas, getting ideas from the startups. A lot of the activity is done like that. But American Express has had a $100 million fund off of that balance sheet, and they basically have invested in some 30, 40 startups right now, and very serious commitments. And one was Abra, which is a blockchain remittance company. Very serious investment. And for Amex, it's a lot of synergies there with that type of company. PayPal bought Zappa with an X. Lots of synergy there. So there's certainly appetite, specifically with IBM. It's a little tricky. I mean, their business model is many different business models and such. They have the Blue Garage, is it called? And they're doing lots of experiments with entrepreneurs as well as startups. I don't know how much investing they're doing. They typically, not yet, but it's coming. So, and the other company you mentioned was Cisco. Yeah, Cisco. Yeah, they've had some history of investing in startups and doing, like the lab that I'm involved with is involving 5 startups, and they're hoping that at least one, if maybe 3 or 4, they will take and at least get to a seed round, and maybe several of those to get to an A round, 20 to 5 million, 2 to 5 million is kind of, that's off the record, please. That's sort of an investment number. That's off the record, please. Don't tweet it. He said this. Don't get me in trouble, please. So, yeah, that number's a lie anyway. So, yeah. So, does that answer your question enough? Can we move on?
So I just took away that generally there is, for a huge number of large corporations, they want to actually enable startups or be a platform for them, but then you have these standalones that perhaps they want to
It's
get
hard, and it's hard for startups, because once you get into the corporate culture there and stuff, then, it's complicated, right? Then you're embedded and molded to them. So in the case of the Cisco model, I like it a lot, because they're giving them money, they're giving them their own money, yes. I'm not sure if they're taking equity or not. So just what percentage, like Amex, yeah, there's some equity taken generally in these types of rounds and such. But that's, it depends on your fundraising strategy and how much you're going to take from a corporate and at what level, at what stage, and what value they're adding to you, of course, all those obvious things perhaps. Yes?
Actually, it's not a question, it's a note.
Okay.
When you come to the website of the blockchain.info,
yeah,
there are many languages to browse the website, but instead of Arabic language, how to call them to install Arabic language to the Arabic users?
Yeah, maybe they're based in London. They also have, I've been to their offices in New York, the blockchain.info guys. Probably they have some contact form on the site. And I think the more people who request Arabic language, the more likely they would open up to that. You might also talk to like the BTC Oasis and to see if they have Blockchain Explorer. Because a lot of the valuable things in blockchain.info can be easily copied. Blockchain Explorers are not that complex anymore to build. Maybe BitOasis will just build one in Arabic. Might be more useful for the ecosystem here and them, BitOasis themselves. Just because they're an exchange, and Blockchain Info, I don't think sells, they might have a partnership deal with someone who sells Bitcoin, but I don't think they're in the business of selling. Yes. Hope that answers your question.
I thank you for this great and professional presentation. Since an expert in blockchain has gained a hype after the Bitcoin. However, do you envisage anything will happen this year with blockchain? An industry that will utilize the blockchain technology to the point they can lift up their industry or their product or services?
The question around, the scaling of this technology, a solution that could really uplift an industry, I think we're a couple years out. Yeah, I don't think it's happening this year. I could be wrong. I'd love to be wrong on this one, particularly. Just like, what will IBM do now that they have, version 1.0 of Fabric? They were hoping to get billable hours some months and months and months ago out of this. Now they have something they can get billable hours out and build real stuff. But still, if you think about, like in the financial services area, even if you have a brand new system, you have to run in parallel 2, maybe 3 years before you can switch over to the new system. Like, I could be wrong, but in terms of the whole industry getting lifted up, I don't think it's here yet. I think it's probably 2 to 3 years out. Any company?
I've seen any company that they are active in blockchain.
Yeah, IBM is just like, they're all over it. They're one of the big leaders in this space. But R3 is doing some very interesting thing with banks, and they might, something may happen there. Identity could get solved to some extent, and the Sovereign Foundation is planning to roll this out to a bunch of credit unions, like dozens and dozens of credit unions this year. So if that identity thing happens with those credit unions, that'll massively lift up the ecosystem. But the whole financial services ecosystem, I think, will take some years. Mike? Green.
Just 2 months ago, IBM actually hosted a blockchain hackathon here.
Camel chain and
Yeah, for their Hyperledger platform. My question is, in terms of identity, which you just mentioned, there's just major issues with whether we can have a digital identity and whether blockchain is the best viable solution for having like a global digital identity. Where do you see like the biggest issue is with concerning identity on the blockchain?
Getting semi-trusted organizations or untrusted organizations to agree on like a standard. We don't have a standard yet, right? So there needs to be some standardization. I think what Sovereign's doing, they're rolling out technology without really having, there's a lot of agreements, there's a lot of this ID 2020 conference that's been going around and such, and they had one at the UN in New York late last year and such, and there's been lots of efforts there to implement identity systems, but there's not been a standard yet. So I think that's probably the major hurdle in my mind, that's not taking place. And so it's the combination of not having a standard, but even once we have one, are we getting these, you know, Saudi agreeing with Japan, agreeing with the USA, and like, are we going to use this thing? We're not going to. We're going to make our own. No, they're going to make their own. We need one for the Middle East. We need one for the Americas. We need, like, who's going to agree on this? So standardization helps. Standardization shouldn't come too early. I don't think it's too early. I think we're about ready to have that, but I'll wait and see. Hyperledger is really helping that, though, because the governance model is very strong with Linux Foundation.
So essentially, there's the difficulty of reaching consensus of which is the best way to do it.
Yeah, and what part, you know, whose IBM, whose blockchain technology are we going to use? But Sovereign, that's what Sovereign's been doing. Okay. They've been developing
My second question is, if we're going to have a blockchain as a service, and that maybe this is a difficult question, someone asked a similar question, is between business to business activities, where do you see that something is commercially viable, where two businesses can utilize blockchain technology to have like saving costs or providing actual value to their business? So
what type of application?
What type of business to business application can be commercially viable with blockchain technology?
A third of the people in the room are trying to figure out, like, including you.
Of course, many people here are entrepreneurs that are trying to find out what to do next.
I'm an educator, you know. I'll stay a little bit away from this question. I'm not going to be starting startup. I'm not going to be investing in them in the short term. We'll take that one offline a little bit.
آخر سؤال يا شباب. عندك آخر سؤال؟